Okay, we are finally doing the last two formulas. We have learned all the formulas after this lesson for this unit. So our last two lessons, what the questions were asking were, what is the account balance? Or it might say something like, where does it say? What's our ending balance? Where's the other phrasing? How much will be in the account, right? So both of those types of questions, what's the account balance or how much money will be in the account? That means the question was asking us to find the balance, given that they were depositing a certain amount of money, however. So the last two lessons, the formulas were both B equals, because both of those question types, again, wanted us to find the balance. So we need a formula that tells us, oh, B equals this. What we're looking at today is going to be the opposite. What they're going to ask us is, how much should they deposit to reach a goal? So this sort of situation is something you would do if you have a financial planner, or just again on your own. You can use this formula to figure out, you know what, I want to have this much money in this certain amount of time. How much do I need to actually deposit to reach that goal? So that's what these two formulas do. If you notice, both of these formulas are going to be out of these two. Find deposit, find deposit. Notice they are both P equals. That's because that's what they do. So I'm going to copy these over. We're doing both formulas just because we've already kind of broken down the first two. It's either finding a single deposit, which is P equals B over 1 plus R over N to the NT. Or it's P equals, let me make sure I got this. I want to clarify this here. This is B times R over N. If you have the formula sheet, it says B R over N. And that might look like it's a mixed fraction. It's not. That does mean B times. I really meant to rewrite that. So I want to clarify that again. This is B times R over N. All over, is it double parentheses or single parentheses, right? Single parentheses, yep. 1 plus R over N to the NT minus 1. So these are the two formulas we're going to be working with. And again, the key is it a single or is it a periodic deposit? That's how we know which one to use. So you have to find the word deposit in the question, read around it, and determine if this is a one-time, that's the only deposit they make, or do they keep making this deposit? These formulas obviously look very similar because these formulas are derived from the first two. Yeah, things are just moved over to solve for P, and that's it. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Again, what we're going to have to do, because we're working with two formulas here, is we're going to read very carefully and determine if it's a single or a periodic deposit to know which formula to use. So let's look at example 1. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson know that in 3 years they would like to have a $30,000 car. So we can see they have a goal in mind. They have an ending balance in mind. They know that. How much should the Johnson single deposit be? This right here is very important. Into an account that yields 5% interest. Also, guys, here, if it doesn't say annual percentage yield, you're not using that formula. So just because it says yields 5% interest, understand that we're not doing APY unless it says annual percent yield. Compound annually in order to have the amount. Okay, so here's the whole question. So here's how we know which formula it's going to be. It says, how much should the Johnson's single deposit be? So of our two choices, what are they asking us to find? The single deposit or the periodic deposit? A single deposit, because it says, how much should the Johnson's single deposit be? So this is the title of the formula we're going to use. They are asking us to find the single deposit. We know the ending balance, so we are going to do P equals because we know what B equals. This is B, right? So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and copy over the formula, actually. Let me see if I can move you down. Nope, that's okay. P equals B over 1 plus R over N to the NT. So with that in mind, now that this is a P equals formula, now my four variables that I'm going to be plugging into are B, R, N, and T. Again, we know that we're not going to plug into P because this formula is too complicated to do that. We'll only plug into the variables on this side. You're not going to plug into P. So I want you to take a moment, read through and see if you can get all these variables. Again, now B is the balance they want to have. So read through and see if you can find the variables. Okay, so 30,000, that is B. That's because, again, that's the balance they want to have in the account so that they can get this car. R is 0.05, 5%. N comes from compounding. And again, it's how many times in a year is what N equals. So if it's compounded annually, well, that's one time, right? Once a year. Compounded annually means it's going to happen once in that year, so 1. And then T is 3. So from here, we just got to plug this in. We got 30,000 on top. We've got 1 plus 0.05 divided by 1 to the 1 times 3. And there we go. So take a moment, go to Desmos, and plug that in. Okay, so let's see, 1 times 3. Now, again, in Desmos, I keep forgetting this because now that I'm in person, I'm able to use these calculators, and I don't have to worry about it with these calculators. But just remember, when you use Desmos, you have to multiply out your exponent first. Granted, it's just going to be 3 in this case. But still, we want to get in the habit of doing that. Okay, so fraction button. Again, guys, with these big fractions, boom, that has to be your first button you hit. 30,000. Very carefully count to make sure you have the correct number of zeros. Common mistake is to just not put the right number of zeros. Parentheses, 1 plus 0.03 divided by 1 is kind of unnecessary, but I'm still going to do it. To the third, right? Whoops, I messed up, 0.05. This is why we double check. Okay, there we go. So we got 25,915.13. Run that to 25,915.13. So because this is a single one-time deposit, that's why it's so much money. You're not going to earn that much money in 3 years. So if you're doing a single deposit, so they're going, boom, money goes into the account and it sits. They're going to have to put in a lot to get to 30,000 in 3 years. Pretty close to 30,000 anyways, right? Because again, this is a single deposit. The money goes in and then it sits for 3 years. So that's how we knew once more it was this formula and not the other, because it says single. So I want to try this next one. Go ahead and read it and see if you can tell how this phrasing is different than the last one. So here's the difference. It says he estimates the total cost to be $5,000. How much must he deposit monthly? Now, because it says how much must he deposit, this is how we know it's going to be a P equals formula. Again, we have B equals for finding the balance, and we have P equals for finding the deposit. How much must he deposit? We want a P equals. But here's the difference. It is periodic because it says how much must he deposit monthly, right? So this is going to be find periodic deposit. Our next lesson is practicing all of these formulas and determining which formula to use and all of that. So we'll have an opportunity to continue to work with that. So you have B times R over N all over 1 plus R over N to the NT minus 1. So same thing. We got B, R, N, and T. Take a moment, write out your variables. Just going to get that out of the way. And then we'll come back and check, and then we'll go to the calculator. Okay, so he wants to have $5,000. That's his goal, right? Again, the purpose of these formulas is when you have a goal in mind, how much do you have to deposit to reach that goal? R is 0.04. N comes from compounding. Monthly, N is 12. Once again, that's how many times in a year it's compounded. It's compounded monthly. That means it happens 12 times. And t is once again 3. So I want you to take a moment. I'm going to go ahead and write this out. I'll give you a second to write it out as well, and then go to the calculator, and then we can come back and check what we get. Okay, so 5,000 is B times R over N, 0.04 divided by 12, all over 1 plus 0.04 divided by 12 to the 12 times 3 minus 1. And again, I'm going to go ahead and do this because I can't put that in Desmos that way. 12 times 3 is 36. But if I didn't know that, obviously, I could go to a calculator. So let's go ahead and plug this in. The very first button you have to hit is the fraction button. Again, guys, if you don't hit the fraction button to start with, you're going to have to backtrack, and it's going to be kind of painful. I've got 5,000. Oops, careful. Let's go to the top. 5,000 times 0.04 divided by 12, right? Yes. I'm going to go to the bottom. I've got parentheses, 1 plus 0.04 divided by 12, close parentheses. Whoops, careful. Again, I can see when I'm making mistakes here too. I got to fix them. There we go. To the 36 minus 1, 130.95. So think, guys, if your answer again makes sense. They're asking, they are going to deposit this much monthly to only reach 5,000. That's not a huge number. They only need to put $130 each month in this account to reach this goal. Versus here again, this was a single one-time deposit in a very short period of time. To reach that goal, they're already going to have a decent chunk of money because it's a very short period of time, so that this money does not have a lot of time to grow. But again, here, they are depositing monthly. So they really don't have to deposit that much because they keep making the deposit. So here's what I want you guys to do on this last question. We are not going to solve it. What I want you to do is I want you to read and figure out how we know this is finding the deposit and how we know if it's single or periodic. What words tell you that? So you don't actually need to solve this. You're just going to go through and figure out how do we know what formula to use, what words tell us that. Again, it's either find single deposit or find periodic deposit. So go ahead and read it, see which one it is. Okay, so again, here's our options. We know that it's going to be find the deposit because that's the focus of this lesson. Here's what tells us it's find deposit. Again, it could be a single or periodic, but just the fact that we're finding the deposit is this. How much must she do as a deposit? That tells us we are finding the deposit. I can't make that any more clear. I know sometimes it's hard to think that through on your own, but that literally tells us how much must she deposit? Find the deposit. Yeah. Now, that tells us it's a single deposit. You gotta be careful though, because sometimes it doesn't say single, it might say once, or how much must she deposit altogether. Otherwise, it would say something like how much must she deposit every week, or how much must she deposit monthly. Again, that tells us periodic. Yeah, over and over again. That's periodic. Again, it might say monthly, weekly, semi-annually, quarterly, something like that. This is just find single deposit. So that is, again, this formula here, but we're not going to go through and solve it. You're going to have an opportunity to do that on your homework. We are going to go ahead and skip this slide for right now. I'm going to come back to this later, probably in the for our little mini project. I'll have you guys do something like that. So for right now, we'll go ahead and wrap up. On your homework, you have to be very careful. You have to read the question. It's either going to be find single deposit or find periodic deposit. It's based on the phrasing.